Rebecca said, my name is Toayoa Aldridge. I'm a program director with the Office of Inspector General, Department of Transportation. In my capacity, I'm responsible for leading audits of pipelines and hazardous materials, rail, transit, highway, and maritime issues. Today, I'm here to talk with you about, as Rebecca referred to earlier, our audit that we issued in May of 2014 of PHMSA's oversight of state safety pipeline programs. State pipeline safety programs. The impetus for our review was the incident, two of the primary incidents that took place in 2010, the Enbridge oil spill in July of that year, and the San Bruno interstate gas pipeline explosion, which killed 8, injured 58, and destroyed 38 homes. The resulting NTSB investigations ultimately found that PHMSA's oversight of state pipeline safety programs was ineffective. Specifically, the CPUC's oversight was ineffective of its operators. In that investigative report, the NTSB asked that the Secretary assess PHMSA's oversight of state pipeline safety programs. What the Secretary in turn did is ask the OIG to conduct an audit. So what did we review? At the request of the Secretary, we specifically looked at PHMSA's guidelines, policies, and procedures for oversight of the state pipeline safety programs, as well as the general oversight of PHMSA's oversight of the pipeline state safety programs, state safety pipeline programs. What did we review in this audit? We randomly selected 5 of the 48 states that participate in the natural gas program. We reviewed we started this, let me go back a little bit. We started this audit in April of 2012. We issued our report in May of 2014. So over a series of 2 years, a little bit over 2 years, we conducted this audit. We reviewed documentation of PHMSA's guidance to states, its policies and procedures, program evaluations, and a sample of expenses submitted by 4 of the 5 states that we looked at for reimbursement, as well as staffing formula documentation. We also shadowed evaluators at 3 of the 5 states for program evaluations, and we shadowed a triennial grant review. So what did we find? In our review, we ultimately found that PHMSA's guidelines to states and its policies and procedures, we found a number of issues that called into question the effectiveness of these policies and procedures and guidelines. First, we found that at the time, PHMSA's staffing formula was outdated. The staffing formula included 3 components: miles of pipeline, number of gas service lines, and inspection units. In addition, the formula predated certain inspection types, such as integrity management. The formula also did not consider the age or composition of pipes. As a result, the formula did not ensure that states were accurately estimating their staffing needs. Next, we found that there were no minimum qualification standards for inspectors who led state standard operation inspections. PHMSA's guidelines gave significant discretion to state program managers to decide when one of its inspectors could lead a standard inspection. This did not ensure that state inspections covered all federal requirements or pipeline operator safety. In one state, we found that an individual who had been inspector for less than a year was tasked with leading standard inspections and had not taken any of the required courses to be fully trained in standard inspections. Next, we found that the guidelines included no detail for how states should include thresholds or weigh risk factors for scheduling inspections. Although the guidelines included 14 risk factors for states to consider when scheduling inspections, they did not state which factors were more critical than others or provide information regarding the number of instances of non-compliance that made an operator high risk. We also found that although PHMSA requires states to inspect all types of operators in accordance with their own established time intervals, they did not specify minimum time frames for frequency of inspections. This did not ensure that states detected and mitigated safety risk. In one instance, we found that a state had allowed as long as 8 years between inspections. We also found that PHMSA staff did not review the adequacy of states' pipeline inspection procedures. While PHMSA's guidelines required state programs to establish procedures for all types of inspections, the agency did not require its own evaluators to review the adequacy of those procedures. As a result, PHMSA could not be sure states properly executed all required inspections. There were also no procedures to inform states of updates to pipeline safety inspection requirements. Although PHMSA updated its inspection forms throughout the year to incorporate new inspection requirements, the agency did not have a mechanism to alert state programs of these changes, nor did it archive the revisions. This did not guarantee that states covered all applicable federal inspection requirements. We found that 4 out of the 5 states were using outdated federal inspection forms. And finally, with regard to the guidelines and policies and procedures, PHMSA had yet to document their written procedures for triennial grant reviews. PHMSA's triennial grant reviews of states' pipeline safety grant expenditures were thorough and in some instances found reimbursement requests that weren't allowed. However, they were not documented. This increased the likelihood that there of errors and inconsistencies for grant reviews conducted in the future by new inspectors. With regard to our review of PHMSA's oversight of safety programs, we found that it was also insufficient to accurately assess state pipeline safety programs and the use of suspension funds. PHMSA evaluators were not trained on how to review states' compliance with agency requirements. Our review of the program requirements for the 5 states showed that PHMSA evaluators did not identify a large number of non-compliances, and those non-compliances fell into 3 critical categories. 1, states did not track whether they performed all inspections within required timeframes. 3 of the 5 states did not comply with PHMSA's requirement to have inspection procedures for all types of inspections, and states did not conduct trend analysis of operators' annual reports. This could provide critical historical information such as pipeline leaks and excavation damage. As a result, this increased the risk that PHMSA evaluators would not accurately identify states' programs' non-compliance and thereby reduce the likelihood that safety risks were mitigated as much as possible. Finally, PHMSA officials had yet to develop a plan to audit suspension funds, which were awarded to states experiencing financial difficulties during the recession and were unable to provide matching funds as required by the Pipes Act of 2006. As a result, PHMSA could not ensure that these funds were being used appropriately or achieving their intended purpose. So what do we recommend? The OIG made a total of 7 recommendations to strengthen PHMSA's guidelines to states, policies and procedures, and improve oversight of state pipeline safety programs. First, we asked that PHMSA revise the staffing formula to account for new inspection types. We also asked that they revise the state program guidelines to include minimum training requirements for lead inspectors, a way to notify states of new federal inspection forms, and time frames allowed between all inspection types. We also asked that they develop procedures to review the adequacy of states' inspection procedures, develop guidance for states to conduct risk analysis for scheduling inspections, document triennial grant review procedures, develop training for PHMSA evaluators to assess states' compliance with requirements and the corrective action process, and develop a plan to audit states' suspension funds. PHMSA ultimately concurred with all of our recommendations and took a series of actions, including revising its guidelines and providing additional training and guidance. First, they revised guidelines to include an inspection and an activity analysis and peer review process, a new approach to more accurately address state staffing needs. They developed minimum training requirements for state inspectors' qualifications to lead standard inspections. They developed a process to notify states of federal inspection form updates. They created maximum intervals between inspections. They developed guidance for state inspection procedures, procedures for conducting triennial reviews, and additional suspension fund guidance in the guidelines. In addition, they developed training, specifically a web-based training on risk assessment methods, and they created review materials for conducting state program evaluations, which was presented at the state program's annual all-hands meetings. Finally, PHMSA developed guidance which included examples of risk-based inspection approaches. Although our audit was completed and issued in 2014, unless PHMSA's actions are implemented effectively, oversight of state pipeline safety programs will still be at risk of being ineffective. It's been a pleasure presenting to you today, and I'll be more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.